Hey, it's the Monster Man, back at it again. And for Black History Month, let's talk about Static Shadows of Dakota. Static Season 2 is an amazing continuation of the first series that continues to deliver fresh ideas on familiar characters. In this video, I want to give a review of Season 2 and cover what I love about this continuation, and possibly a few changes I hope to see going forward. Let's look at a brief overview of the Anansi team-up story. This was a really fun issue that I recommend anyone pick up. It essentially involves Static teaming up with Anansi to rescue the devilish Bang Baby Devante from a magical cult trying to resurrect a demon. I like this story for a few reasons. First being that we learn Devante's actual powers outside of his appearance is the ability to phase through objects, which may be something I missed from Season 1, but this issue definitely solidified to me that that's his ability. And it's a useful skill that likely explains how he survived a few close calls from Bang Babies being captured in Season 1. Seeing Anansi was a great nostalgic throwback. I think this is his first official DC comic appearance, as I believe he was an original character to the Static TV show. That being said, he does have some pretty notable changes from the TV series, most of which I actually like. In the Static TV series, Anansi only had the power to stick to surfaces and cast illusions using his staff. In this comic, his abilities have changed significantly, and he is much stronger for it. His abilities appear to have closer ties to the actual godly being Anansi's storytelling aspect, as opposed to just the trickster aspect of illusion casting. He seems to have a true use of magic. We see him bind enemies with magic webs, as well as use telekinesis to push enemies through walls. We also see him create solid clones and even teleport. His teleportation seems to tie into his powers as the god of stories, where you can follow another person's story to its next endpoint. It's a very interesting ability that gets kind of meta. I do think the original Anansi with the illusion casting was cool in its own right, but this version of the character has its own merit. I'd love to see him in the wider DC universe working with other magic characters like Zatara and Constantine. I think Anansi could bring an interesting dynamic to their comics. I'll spare you some of the finer details so you can enjoy that yourself, but ultimately Static helps Anansi fight a few African spirits and deities and manages to rescue his friend while setting up Anansi to have potential future adventures. On the whole, it was a great outlet to see the character once again, and it does a good job of continuing to build out this updated Dakotaverse. And I do want to touch on that point real quick though. I have read that the Static and other Milestone comics do have their own Earth designation and do not take place in the main DC universe. I think this is a big mistake personally, and I don't really see the reason why they couldn't just roll these into the main timeline. There are actually plenty of reasons why other characters would not get involved with what's going on in Static's town, primarily being that they have their own heroes and villains already, so interference from bigger names like Superman or Batman just wouldn't be necessary. Involvement would also be a political landmine for any hero, given that some of the public doesn't expect the existence of Bang Babies, so that alone could retroactively be applied to any questions people have for why other heroes didn't get involved. On some level, I do like that this takes place on other Earth in the short term, to give the world some space to build out without having interference of DC events, but I really would like to see these characters fully integrated into the main timeline at some point. The new Milestone has multiple characters like Fade and his sister who can effortlessly slide between realities, so writing in a retroactive way to slip them into the main timeline should not be difficult at all once some of these core arcs are completed. But back to my review. Static Shadows of Dakota officially starts a few months after the end of Static Season 1, which again is Static Volume 1. I feel like I need to point that out, that they just chose to go with a seasonal title for that first arc. Static seems fully set into his hero role, which is good to see, and he seems to be managing his civilian and hero activities pretty well. He's following in his dad's footsteps with community participation and activism, and it's awesome to see him being a hero in and out of costume. It's a nice reminder that you can actually do good here in our real world by volunteering for those in need as well. And sometimes you do just need that reminder that you can do things to help people if you want. The Bang Babies are also getting somewhat integrated back into society and slowly starting to be accepted, and this is good narrative progression in my opinion that kind of reflects how things should shake out in the real world, especially when many of the Bang Babies are actually minors in the community. You can't exactly deny their existence forever, and eventually people would try to help them since they're, just teenagers. This progress is shown by his dad's Bang Baby program starting up, and just seeing enemy Bang Babies from before show up at these public events is pretty heartwarming. The antagonist of this season is still pulling the same scheme from Season 1, though a new mercenary group has popped up to hunt down the Bang Babies. Static is more confident in his abilities in this series, and has no trouble taking on soldiers with automatic weapons, as he literally yanks weapons out of the mercenaries' hands, and takes them out with ease without killing them. This is notable to this arc as well, because this arc is all about questioning Static's approach, as we see a new anti-hero is on the scene, Ebon. Ebon is Static's arch nemesis from the Static TV series, who was an original character from that show. In that show, Ebon is a bit more definitively a villain, as he is a gangbanger even before the Big Bang, trying to make it big in crime. After getting his powers in the show, he became obsessed with power and control, and did everything possible to keep his powers even when a cure was found for the Bang Babies. In this comic, Ebon retains his brutal nature, but it's unclear if he will ultimately end up as a villain here. In this series, Ebon acts fully as an anti-hero, going after the mercenaries abducting Bang Babies with a singular goal of saving his little brother. In contrast to Static's approach, Ebon fully overwhelms the soldiers with using his powers and killing them whenever he sees fit. Ebon actually has quite the power upgrade from his original appearance. Along with his shape-shifting and teleportation abilities, he also has psychic powers, which would make him a threat for almost any hero in the DC universe, as he forcibly takes information from any soldier he gets his hand on, and unlike Static, he is fully willing to kill without prejudice. This comic really does make you question if he's wrong for doing this, because these soldiers are not very redeemable, as I think you will agree as we continue to cover this story. In issue 2, we get a look at Ebon's brother, who still has the same powers from the TV series, being incredible elasticity that allows him to become the Rubber Band Man. He is being held in a room of 24-hour light, specifically made to keep out Ebon. It's implied that his elastic body allows him to survive the many experiments that kill the other Bang Babies, and that he is the key to recreating the Bang Baby formula due to this unlikely durability. To parallel this relationship, we are introduced to Static's surrogate little brother, Quincy. Quincy is a character I can relate to somewhat. He has parents that often have to work late to provide for him, much like my parents did when I was little, and it wasn't uncommon to be left with a family friend who had the time to watch between the gaps of school and them finishing work. It's nice to see this kind of lifestyle represented in comics, because I don't think it's that uncommon depending on where you're from. I like that they continue to capture these little aspects of life that I don't often see represented. While watching Quincy, Static gets drawn away from him due to a distress call from the community center, subtly foreshadowing something that'll happen later. At the center, Static is met with the same mercs that tried to take Bang Babies, except with upgraded gear that resist his electrical powers. They manage to catch Static in a dampening net before he can regroup, but Destruct steps in to take care of the soldiers. Destruct was a character from season 1 I didn't recognize, who is actually from the TV series, just in a different form. In the TV show, Destruct took on a pure energy form that he couldn't permanently shut off. In this comic, Destruct has more of a resemblance to his original Milestone appearance as a molten monster who has full control of his human and monster form. One of his powers is energy transference, and that appears to be intact, as we see him making a soldier's head go molten. Never officially stated, but in my headcanon, he definitely killed that soldier, and I approve. I also like Destruct getting an official hero moment in this story, because in the comic and the show, he was forced to do evil outside of his own will, and they seem to be going a different direction here, and letting him have more agency as a hero, and I like it. Destruct manages to get the soldiers to leave, but they do make it away with someone from the community center, unfortunately. After this interaction, we find out Quincy is also a Bang Baby and one of the targets for abduction, but Static doesn't know this yet. The third issue gives us more Ebon, and one of his definitive power scaling moments against the Blood Syndicate. Despite the name, the Blood Syndicate is a team of heroes, or probably more apt anti-heroes, and one that actually could go toe-to-toe with the Justice League in my opinion, and I plan to make a video about that in the future. We only get 3 members here, but nonetheless it tells you all you need to know about how powerful Ebon is. Wise Man is essentially a Luke Cage, but much more durable and probably stronger. Wise Man has no known limit to what damage he can take, and he could easily take hits from a Superman level character and be fine. Tech 9 is pretty much just a Green Lantern with no need for a power ring. He can psionically create any technology with his mind and generate force fields. Fade is a strange character who can be fully intangible in a split second, much like Martian Manhunter. He has other time and reality hopping abilities, but those aren't exactly powers for a fight. Just know that he's pretty much untouchable. We see that Ebon still has his portal making abilities, as he traps Wise Man in one of his portals, so he can't be hit by Wise Man's physical attacks. He then counters Tech 9's onslaught of bullets by opening portals to reflect the bullets back at him, and he forces Tech 9 to use the shields to block. Even though he can't physically hurt Fade, Ebon shows how powerful he is by taking out both Fade and Tech 9 with one psychic attack that makes them see their biggest fears. His new psychic powers show that even being intangible is not enough to escape the power of Ebon, and I love this. It establishes Ebon as a huge threat for just about anyone, since he could take out 3 extremely powerful superheroes with ease. I also think this elevates Static, who we know is someone who will be able to eventually contend with Ebon, and reminds us he's the character to watch, and respect for his abilities. The next thing shows that Static's family are still in his corner, and giving him good advice to not blindly act and let the police help track down the criminals. But his sister knows he'll act and warns him about Ebon, and I like that this is being carried over from the last series, because giving the non-heroes agency is what all comics should do more of. His family just doesn't just sit by and let Static do everything. They get involved with the police, they give him good advice, and they help him wherever he can. And some comics forget that unpowered people can still act. We also get a scene that shows that Frida is going abroad and Static's other friends are busy. I actually appreciate this scene because there are a lot of characters in Static, and this volume 2 kind of highlights that there isn't time for everyone to get development in one arc, and the cast was getting a little bloated. I think there will be time as the series continues to flesh out these other characters, so setting them up to be busy with other things gives Static time to focus on the villains and helping the other Bang Babies at hand. The issue ends with Quincy celebrating his science fair victory with his parents, who he didn't think would show up, only to be abducted the next morning on his way to school by the Bang Baby hunters. Static's dad helps mobilize the police to look for Quincy by pointing out the subtle racism towards Bang Babies and suggesting negligence, that they aren't searching for a minor, and Quincy's parents are grateful for his assistance. Static begins searching on his own and tracks down the mercenaries, and in a callback to Volume 1, he uses the black dust created by hardware as a conduit for his magnetism, so he can manipulate the mercenaries' weapons, even though they're resistant to his electromagnetic powers. This shows off Static's intelligence in overcoming his weakness, even when his opponents are trying specifically to counter him. Static's takedown of these soldiers is interrupted by Ebon, who has tracked down the same group. Ebon takes over the fight and mercilessly kills the mercenaries to prove his point to Static. Static tries to stop him, so Ebon traps Static in a shadow space. In the shadow space, Static can't manipulate electricity since he has no electromagnetic field to draw on, and he is assaulted by Ebon's mental attack. He tells Static he isn't ready to do what needs to be done to resolve things, and I don't think Ebon is fully wrong here. What these soldiers are doing is rooted in hate, and they're doing these things to minors. A level of force is warranted here in my opinion. Ebon beats Static, not necessarily out of pure malice, but just to point out that he isn't ready to fight, and releases him back into the alley as he goes back to trying to find his brother. If you didn't believe me before about these mercs deserving what's coming, one of the biggest twists in the story is that Quincy is found, and he's dead. I actually didn't see this turn of events coming, and I think this death is one of the defining moments of Static's character, as he's forced to question if he's doing enough to stop these crimes. He actually confides this to his mother. He knows he could have killed these mercenaries, and if he did, he wonders if the violence would have stopped. His mother relates her experience as a doctor to point out that sometimes you try everything, and it's just not enough, and you can't save everyone, but that's not an excuse to stop trying. She also suggests that using more force may lead to more people in the hospital instead of solving the problem at hand, and it's not touched on here, but I think readers can extrapolate that all this force could lead to an involuntary justification of targeting Bang Babies by meeting Bang Babies with the same amount of force. But the author kind of leaves you to think on that. But it was the conclusion I came to. After this devastating news though, we get the most cathartic transition to Ebon finally tracking down the base of the Bang Baby hunters, and he pretty brutally takes out everyone in the base. This is exactly what I needed after hearing Quincy was dead, and definitely has you rooting for Ebon. Ebon also confirms his methods are effective, as this confrontation leads him directly to his brother, which reinforces the idea that Static's methods may not be effective since he still has not found this base. Unfortunately, Ebon was planned for, and he actually can't get close to his brother to free him, and realizes that he'll need Static's help due to the overwhelming light flooding the room. Ebon effortlessly tracks down Static and draws Static into his mindscape in order to convince Static to work with him to rescue his brother. He shows Static that they had very similar start to their lives, where their father was a guidance counselor who helped the community like Static's father, but Ebon's father confronted the police about harassment and was killed for it. Ebon's mother was in and out of the hospital, but not because she was a doctor, because she had cancer, and the cancer may have been treatable, but his family couldn't afford the treatment, and this eventually led to his mother's passing. On top of that, Ebon shows Static his perspective of the protest that started the Big Bang, and we see a character Ebon is holding who isn't named, but looks like it's possibly his girlfriend who died during the protest before the Big Bang went off. Ebon explains that he felt all the pain of everyone at the protest at once when the Big Bang happened, and it absorbed into him, and that caused him to take the name Ebon to describe his new state of being, possessing all the pain from everybody in the Big Bang. I have to say, this is a perfect new origin. It's tragic, and this is clearly a man who has lost everything except his brother. I even like the idea of absorbing the horrible feelings of everyone around him to create this new psychic form. It explains why he is so brutal and why he's so set in his ways. The world wasn't kind to him, so why does he need to give anything back to the world? I need to see the series continue to see if Rubber Band Man will be able to introduce optimism into him, like he tried to do in the original cartoon. Also, the Static's retorts to this dark outlook, as he points out no amount of killing will ever be enough to make Ebon feel whole again, and trying to convince Static to adopt his murderous ways in the name of Quincy is not going to fly with him, because Quincy wouldn't want people to murder in his name. He would want justice. Static then figures out how to overcome Ebon's psychic attack by targeting Ebon's electrical current in his brain to introduce light into the mindscape instead of trying to pull electricity from the outside. This is the clever solution I come to expect from Static, and it continues to show that he is a genius, and while he does have powers, it's his brain that makes him the hero that he is. I think this has to be one of the definitive Static Shock series because of moments like this. They have a pretty epic fight you should read for yourself, but ultimately it culminates in Static agreeing to help Ebon save his brother, but he says they're going to do it his way, which means no killing, as any true hero should. That brings us to the final issue, and this is the only issue I have to give criticism to, because it really feels like they just ran out of issues. I think this arc needed about 2 more issues, and they just didn't have the approval, but let me get into it. This issue starts with a backstory for a character we have not seen up to this point, and it turns out this character is the scientist ordering all these abductions to create an artificial Bang Baby formula. This plot is fine. It mirrors a similar plot to the TV show where scientists create pods that give temporary Bang Baby powers, but it feels like this character should have been introduced way earlier in the series, because the fight takes place immediately after this backstory, so it really feels like it wasn't properly built up. If we had seen more glimpses of this scientist in early issues, or even some progression of the Bang Baby formula getting better and better, this would seem like a better final fight. Instead, we see the results of the research pretty much as soon as we are introduced to the concept, as she injects herself to give herself the power to create barriers that can repel Static and Ebon's physical attacks. Ebon tries psychic fear attacks, which is his usual go-to, but because she is a character with no remorse or fear, the attack is completely ineffective. Where the story really feels like it ran out of time is the conclusion. Ebon and Static enter the mindscape together and find her happy moments to bring back the humanity to her and force her to actually reflect on the pain she's caused. And on paper, this isn't actually a terrible idea, but the execution is horrible. I'd like to remind everybody that comics are a visual medium, and instead of going into the mindscape and showing us those good memories she had, we get this long description of what's going on with Ebon, Static, and the woman just standing there. It literally feels like they ran out of pages to actually show you what's happening. Personally, I think I would have preferred if we just skipped the backstory in the intro, since we don't even know who this character is, and just play the backstory when Static enters the mindscape and add a few more dialogue boxes to wrap up, bringing her back to her happy place before she was corrupted into the evil person she is now. I think that would have honestly saved this ending, and I think it could have been done with a similar page count. But that also brings me to my final nitpick, and I was saving it for now because it's just that, a nitpick, because I don't think this little thing is the reason why the ending's bad, but just kind of shows it may have been rushed. But basically, it is established definitively that Ebon cannot easily move in and out of this room due to the 24-hour lights, and he would need Static to get in. Static opens the door to the lab, but all of the lights are fully intact for the whole fight. It actually doesn't make sense that Ebon can move freely in the room. If all he needed was the door opened, he could have just waited for the scientist to enter the lab, or just wait for the door to open at any other point in time. It would have been nice to see them add a single panel of Static just frying half the lights so Ebon could move, and that would serve as a proper explanation, but we just don't get that. Again, the more egregious issue is the anticlimactic wrap-up that wasn't told visually, but the comic nerd in me won't let that little plot hole slide without letting somebody know. With the scientists defeated, they free Ebon's brother, and Static gets to properly mourn Quincy at his funeral in an epilogue. We see Ebon one more time tell Static thank you, and that he will take a step back for now, but he'll be back if things start to get worse, and enact his form of justice, and that's the perfect send-off for Ebon. He is a looming, brutal avenger that will step back into the fold if Static's less lethal methods don't cut it, and I think that's the role he should play. This anti-hero version of Ebon is much better to me than the power-hungry villain. And that wraps up my little summary of the plot here. But one more thing I just have to say, I love the visual style of this comic done by Nicholas Draper Ivey and Will Quintana, and they've created something amazing for this series. You can really see the anime and Korean manhwa inspired inspirations in the character designs and in the low detail backgrounds. The visual effects of things like lightning and gunfire really feel like the action's popping out of the page in a way I just can't get enough of. They took the time to use detail for the backgrounds on the wider shots to establish spaces, and it really feels expertly done because backgrounds are something I don't often pay much attention to in comics, but in this series, it feels notable and striking. Like, look at this train scene. We know it's a train not because of the shape, but because of the detailed tracks in the foreground and the lighting that just feels like the train's headlights. It's ominous and it captures the mood perfectly without having to fully draw a train rushing down the tracks. I love it. I really want to see more comics use this kind of style in the future, especially the lighting, because at times it kind of feels like you're watching a TV series with how immersive these effects are for me personally. But of course mileage will vary on something like that, and art is always subjective, but this really feels fresh for the American comic space. I also have to give props to the character design again. Ebon looks amazing in his shadow form, looking like he has glowing tribal tattoos at times, and they nail his haircut in his human form. I love seeing black haircuts done right, and even Static's is on point. Static's hair isn't just angular and straight, it's fuzzy and puffed, and properly capturing those details is something more artists needs to do, I know it's because the black creators are on this project that they got it right, but that doesn't mean only black creators can get this right. More people drawing black characters can achieve this heightened design as well. This is just one of my favorite series of the last year, and I really just want more going forward, and if possible with the same creative team, because I think they're getting everything right. I think that's all I have to say for this 9 out of 10 series. I think everyone should pick this up on Amazon or their nearest comic shop to check out the little things I left out for yourself. And I promise you that slightly weak ending is still satisfying, and you will not be overly disappointed if you read it for yourself. And I'd like to just say, if you sat through this whole video, thank you, and leave a like and comment below. And if there's any series you want me to discuss, let me know down below. And if you want to see me talk Static Volume 1, click the link above to get started. Thank you, and I hope you have an awesome day.